started. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you. I know we have a lot of other folks coming in for our July SASA storytelling night, and we have a lot of folks that are live sitting to my right, and then there'll be other folks coming on in. But as you can see, there's also folks on Zoom, and I hope we continue to gather folks in for this evening. My name is Sue Kuentz, and I am the San Antonio Storytellers president. And we have our co-host sitting right next to me, and that's John Hale. And I'm hoping you'll be able to hear him tonight because he'll be sharing a story. My other co-host is my husband, Chuck, and he's kind of running this camera, making sure things work out there. And we have storytellers coming in as I begin, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce our very first teller because we have so many tellers tonight. I do hope at some point, if any of you, if we have any extra time, and you would like to share a story, just slip us a note through chat, and I'll make sure I get your name down. Our very first teller is one of our very own, SASA's Mark Babino. And Mark lived here in San Antonio for a long time, but his family is originally from Beaumont, but also all the way over from New Orleans. And he tonight is going to be telling a Creole tale. There's some words I want you to know that he introduced me to. Let's see how good at this that I am. The very first one would be compare le pas, brother rabbit. Compare Baluki, brother fox. I think that was not correct, but this is a Creole tale from Louisiana. How about a big hand for Mark Babino?
Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
This is a story of Jean Set, and Jean Set is sort of like an Amelia Bedelia. There was this fellow, Jean Set. He was so foolish that people made fun of him. He would take a lantern and he would light it in the middle of the day. And then at night, he would blow it up. In summer, he would wear gray, big, heavy coats. And then in the winter, oh mon Dieu, he was nearly naked. In short, he did everything contrary to common sense. Now, King Bangon, who loved to play tricks, he called Jean Sut to his court. And when Jean arrived, he said, Jean Sut, they tell me that you can count. He said, oui, I can count eggs. I count 6 eggs and 4 eggs. Bon, said the king. So what is your total number? Jean Soto, he went all the way back home to count the eggs. He come back, he tell King Bango, it didn't change from yesterday. I had 4 eggs and 6. Oh, said the king, and he kind of chuckled. He said, now Jean Soto, they tell me that compare lapin, the rabbit, that's you, papa. Oui, that is my papa. And compare Bouki, no? Compare lapin. A man say, no, I hear compare lapin, not you, papa. Compare Bouki. He said, oui, that is my papa. A woman say, no, Renard is you, papa. He said, oui, he is my papa. They are all my papa. Every morning when they see me, they say, bonjour, mon petit. Bonjour, my child. So King Bangon, he says, Jean Sut, I need you to go home, come back tomorrow and bring me a bottle of bull's milk. I need that for my daughter, she's sick. And I want you to come back in 1 month's time on the 1st of April. And I want to ask you something. And if you can guess it right, I will give you my daughter's hand in marriage. But if you do not guess after 3 times, I will have you naked. Jean said, okay. So he go home and he tell his maman everything that happened, and oh, she cried, oh, an exodus of tears. You know, she loved her son, but he wasn't too smart. He was couillon, we say. Oh, she begged him not to go because that didn't make sense. Jean said, no. He has to bring the goat's milk, the bull's milk. She said, but no, you can't. She threatened to call the sheriff and throw him. But Jean, he remained steadfast. And so the next morning, before the crack of dawn, he got up early, he took an axe while his mom was still asleep. And he went out to the castle. And when he get to that castle, I'm telling you, it was a big tree. Big. You know big? Big. It was bigger than that.
Huge.
Oh, it was bigger than that.
Enormous.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's too many. We'll just say big. Let's just say with big. It was a big tree. It was an oak tree. And Jean stood, he had his axe, he climbed that oak tree and he sat on one of the branches and he started to cut. The cook, he run out, he look up at that tree, he said, "Mais jamais la vie, never in my life. What business do you have in that tree?" Jean said, "This is my business. It's not yours. I will only tell the king." And he continued to chop. The king's dresser, he run out, he look up in the tree, he said, "Mais jamais la vie, what you doing in that tree?" He said, "Do not bark at me like a dog. I shall only tell the king." And he continued to chop. The king comes up, he look, he says, "Jean said, what are you doing in that tree?" Jean said, he looked, he said, "Oh, during the night, my papa, he gave birth to twins, Gaeton and Gaston. I need this bark to make me some tea." The king, he looked, he said, "Mais jamais la vie, Jean. A man cannot give birth to twins." He looked, he said, "No more than a bull can give milk." He said, "You are not the food that they want us to believe, Jean said. Go into the kitchen and my cook, he will make you something to eat, but you must come back in 1 month's time." Jean, he agreed. Well, the month passed. Jean said early that morning before the break of day, he get on his horse, and he leave without his memondo. Now, compare Bouquet, who is a rascal and an evil, mean-hearted thing. He saw Jean Soot and he said, that's Jean Soot. He couillon. They will chop off his neck and the king will keep the horse. It's better if I get that horse. Look at y'all. Don't you say nothing, no. You keep your mouth closed and you're going to see what I'm going to do. Well, compare Bouquet now. He knows Jean Soot. He greedy, yeah. Oh, he likes sweets. And he made a dozen and dozen of some sweets and he laced it with poison. And he put it out on the bridge where he knew Jean Soot had to pass. Now, compare Lapin. He knew that compare Bouquet. And he thought to himself, Jean Soot, that's my mon ami. He remembered the time that he was caught in a snare and it was Jean Soot who freed him. So he went ahead and he saw Jean Soot. He said, "Look, I'm going to help you, my friend. This is what I want you to do. When you continue on your journey, I don't want you to eat or drink anything. I don't care how thirsty you are or how hungry you are. And when the king asks you a question, come here, Shaq. This is what I want you to say." And he whispered in Jean Soot's ear. Jean Soot, he kind of smiled. He got on his horse and he was going away and compare Bouquet. He said, "Bon voyage, my friend." He said, "And you pay attention to everything. And when you married the queen's daughter, you remember compare Lapin." "Oui," said Jean. And he go down the road and sure enough, he come to that bridge. And he could see that basket of sweets. And it smelled good, yeah. Yeah. It was some sweet dough pie sprinkled with cinnamon. So Jean Soot, he got up and he took one and he remembered what Compère Lapin told him. And he thought, maybe not. I'll give it to my horse first. And so he gave it to his horse and just like that, the horse, he fell over dead, yeah. Jean said, that could have been me, yeah. And so he took that horse, that dead carcass, and he threw it into the river, and the current was taking it. He watched. And then 3 buzzards came and lighted on the top of that carcass, and they began to eat. And Jean, he just watched it go down the current. He thought with Compère Lapin said, look and pay attention. Then he got on his horse. He rode to the castle. Oh, and when he got there, the heads that had already rolled, maybe 50 or more, because they couldn't ask the king's question. And when they saw Jean Sut, they said, oh, no, mon Dieu, poor Jean, he shouldn't try no. So the king, he said, Jean Sut, you ready for my question? Jean said, oui. He said, now, I want you to tell me, what is it that can walk on 4 legs in the morning, and then at noon, it can walk on 2, and then in the evening, it walk on 3. Jean said, look, he said, and if I guess, I get to marry your daughter? The king said, oui. He said, oh, well, that's easy. The king said, bon, allons, tell us, or my executioner will have your neck. Jean said, it's a child. Early in the morning, he crawl on 4 legs. And then at noon, when he grow, he have 2. And then as he gets older in the evening, he has a stick and he has 3. Oh, the people, their mouth drop. Oh, but they say, oh, that's Jean's son. The king say, oh, Jean, you get to marry my daughter. Now, anyone here who wanna ask me something, go ahead and ask me, because I know the answer to everything. Jean said, he looked. He said, I think I have something for you. The king said, oh, anybody, okay, Jean. And if I can't answer it, you get my kingdom and you get my fortune. Jean said, oh, okay. Then tell me, what is the thing? What is the thing that's a dead thing and it can feed a living thing? It does not touch the land and it is not of the sky. But the king, he guessed once, 1,000 times, he couldn't guess the answer. Jean said, this morning my horse, it died, and I threw it in the river. 3 buzzards came, and they ate it. It was a dead thing, giving nourishment to a living thing. It was not of the land, and it wasn't of the sky. He said, now, you give me your kingdom and your fortune. Well, Jean said, he ruled over very, very well. And he took Compere Lapin as his counsel. And as for Compere Bouquet, it didn't end good. I'm not going to tell you that. But the people, they changed his name from Jean Sut, the fool, to John Esprit, the wise. Now, as my mama would say, c'est tout, which means that's it. C'est tout.
Yes, thank you so much. And so we got a little bit of Louisiana brought right to us, wherever we are. By the way, we are right here in Kuentz flooring. And anytime you're here in San Antonio, and all of you who are here, Kuentz is just the most amazing family. And everything here is offered for 15% off. 10% off. Sorry. I tried. So please stop in anytime. We love them. We love that they allow us to be here. And with all the technology, which is awesome. Our next storyteller is actually on Zoom. And her name is Elizabeth Beamon, a good friend of mine, a good friend of several storytellers here. And she will be your friend too after she storytells tonight. She's got a fabulous way with her storytelling, down to earth. You see, she was a librarian, an amazing librarian. She's retired, but once a librarian, always a librarian. Her voice soothes everybody's soul. Her stories go from tiny tales to personal tales for all of us to connect to. How about a big hand for Elizabeth Beamon?
Well, thank you, Sue. I'm so excited to be here. It's not as hot in North Texas as it has been, but we're still trying to keep cool inside. So I'm grateful for Zoom tonight. Well, there was a new king in the kingdom, and word had spread that he loved to hear what people could offer. And there was a man, and he had a daughter. And the daughter was very beautiful. She was very talented, but the man had sort of a problem. Everybody that already knew him knew that he sort of stretched the truth. And so when he heard that there was a new king, he started to think, what could he tell the king that the king would like him? And so he thought and he thought, and the tale started to circulate that his daughter, who could do beautiful spinning, that she could spin straw into gold. Well, it wasn't long, and the king heard that, and he had asked an audience with the father. And when the father came before him, he said, I heard that your daughter is a beautiful spinner. And not only is she beautiful to behold, but she spins beautiful cloth, and that she even can spin gold. And I would like to meet her. Well, by this time, he was quite upset. The father said, I have really overstepped myself because my daughter can't do that. But he didn't want to tell the man that, the king. And so he brought his daughter, and he thought, I will let her explain. So the king said, I've heard that you can spin beautiful fabric. And she said, I have learned from my mother and my grandmother before her. And here it is. And then he said, and then I heard that you can spin straw into gold. It was the first she'd heard of that. She's what could she say? She said, well, no, I can't do that. He said, don't be modest. I have a room for you. I have straw for you. You have a night to spin it into gold. Well, she went and she sat there and she looked at the straw and she looked at the spindle and she thought, oh, I don't know how to do that. And so she began to weep, and then she began to wail. And when she wailed, all of a sudden, there was a little man in her room. And he said, stop that ruckus. What is that horrible sound you're making? Oh, I'm so distraught. I've been told to spin this straw into gold, and I don't know how to do that. He said, oh, that is nothing for me. What would you give me so that I might do that for you? I have this ring. Oh, I like that ring. Okay, give me the ring, take a nap, and I'll spin. And so, sure enough, that's what he did. All night long, he spun all the straw into gold. The king came in the next morning. Oh, he was so pleased. He said, this is wonderful, but I guess I didn't give you enough straw. So tonight I'll give you twice as much straw and you can make me more gold. Oh, but I don't really know how to do that. Don't be modest. You're fine. We'll watch. Don't watch. And so, sure enough, she began to weep. She began to wail. Oh! And as she wailed, all of a sudden, that little man was in the room. He said, stop it. I hate that sound. What are you doing? Oh, he gave me more straw. You know, I don't know how to do this. He said, just what do you have to give me? And I'll do it for you. Oh, I have this necklace that my father gave me. Oh, I'll take it and go to sleep or just turn around. I don't want to look at you. And so sure enough, he began to spin the straw into gold. And she was actually able to fall asleep for a little bit. And when she woke up, He was gone. There was the gold, and in came the king. Oh, he was delighted to see so much gold. He said, tonight, when you spend me more gold from the straw I'm going to bring, which will be 3 times as much, I will marry you this next quarter. She goes, I really can't do that. I can't. He said, do it. And he left. And sure enough, more straw was brought in and the spindle. And she said, oh no, I can't do it. I have nothing to give the little man. And so she began to weep and she began to wail. And then she said, where's the little man? And boop, there he was. He said, I am so tired of that noise you make. Are you wailing because of the straw into gold? Yes, I can't do it. You know I can't. He said, well, what do you give me? I don't have anything. I gave you the ring. I gave you the necklace. I have nothing. He said, then I heard you're going to be married if this works out. Well, such rumors. Well, I don't know if that's true. He said, when you marry the king and when you have a child, I will come for the child and you will give it to me. She said, I don't even know. He said, trust me. She said, well, I don't, oh, okay. And so she let him spin the straw into gold. And she didn't go to sleep that night because she's thinking, is the king really going to marry me? Will I really have a child by him? Will I have to give the child up? Oh, so many thoughts. Well, sure enough, the next morning, there was the piles of gold. The king came in. He was delighted. And now I was really surprised in this story because he didn't ask for more. In fact, he honored his word and married her. And so she became very happy, actually fell in love with him. And one day she was expecting a baby. And 9 months later, she had the baby. And when she had the baby, all of a sudden, the king was off hunting and a little man came into her room. He said, I'm ready for the baby, the child. No, you can't take, I can give you anything. I know you can make gold, but I have jewels. I can give you anything. You can't take my child. And he said, that was the deal. And then he thought for a moment. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 3 days to figure out what my name is. And if you can figure out my name, I will rescind my thoughts on the child. So I did. Every day I have to guess names. He says, yes, it's an unusual name. Oh, thank you. Thank you. So he left. So she started to think. He came back in a few hours. She says, is it John? Is it Henry? Is it Galdolf? What is it? Is it? And everything was no. Tomorrow I'll come again. But really, we don't have to waste the time. I would like you just go ahead and give me the child and we'll be done. No, let me have my 3 chances. So the next day he came and it was more names. She thought more names, unusual names, names she hadn't heard in a very long time, and they were none. So she sent messengers out to look, and they went far and wide. And she just wept. She didn't wail. Her husband was on a hunting trip. He didn't even know this was going on. Then, the last night before the man was coming, the messenger was coming through the woods, a strange forest. And in that strange forest, there was a strange fire. And by that strange fire, there was a little man. And the little man was singing, my name is Rumpelstiltskin. She will never know. I will have a child that will grow. And the messenger thought, Rumpelstiltskin? And he ran as fast as he could with his horse. He got to the kingdom, the castle, and he said to the queen, I have the name. I have the name. It was a little man. He was singing and he whispered it to her. She said, oh, thank you, thank you. Sure enough, here came the little man about an hour later. He said, I'm just tired of playing the game. Give me the baby. I'm ready to go and get on with my life. And I know you are too. The king will be back today, I'm sure, for hunting. Well, no, our bargain was I could guess. So she threw out a few names, unusual names: Red Wolf, Black Stallion. He's going, stop. You will never guess my name. She said, well, could it perhaps be Rumpelstiltskin? And, he, and with that, he stomped the floor and he poof, disappeared. It was a couple of hours later when the king came back from his hunting trip. He was very happy. And the queen, well, let's just say she was very happy as well. The end. Thank you.
Well, I should say, it all happens when the king is gone, of course. And the queen had to take care of business with he who should be named Rumpelstiltskin. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for reminding us of such a fabulous, fabulous fairy tale. I love that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next teller is also on Zoom. He's not here in San Antonio, although he is a SASA member also. He just lives out in another state. I believe it's North Carolina, Jamie Blount. And it's so nice for him to join us when he does. He has some great personal tales, and I'm sure tonight will be just as wonderful. How about a big hand for Jamie?
Thank you. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Well, as we all know, yesterday was the 4th of July, but that's not why I sang that song. And I hope that some of you didn't lose your hearing because you had to listen to me sing. I'm not an accomplished singer, as you know. But years ago, when I worked in Europe, in Central Europe, teaching English as a second language, back in the early 1990s, it was a whole different world back then. Hungary, where I taught, had just emerged from being under communist rule for many years. And in some ways, Hungary was kind of a poor country. People had enough to eat, and people could get medical care when they needed it, but it wasn't a very modern, affluent, upbeat place. So teachers, myself being one, had equipment to use to teach, namely a piece of chalk and a blackboard. That was about all we had, not to mention some materials that were provided by the state. So I had to teach my students some English that they could use and learn to pronounce English with, because one of the best ways to learn to pronounce a foreign language is to sing in the language. So we did quite a lot of singing together. And I'm sorry to say that sometimes I didn't have a cassette tape with the music I wanted, so I had to sing the music for the students. Well, we didn't have any problem with that, or if the students did, they didn't tell me. Well, I was visiting in Hungary this year, back in June, late May, early June, and I went back to the very school where I was a teacher. And I had the opportunity to work with some students who are currently learning English there. And while I was there, I spoke to them and explained my work there before. And I taught them how to sing God Bless America. I guess I could have gotten a CD or gone to youtube.com and done it that way. But I thought, no, I'd like to let him see how I used to teach when I was here, back before the big explosion of music and CDs and the internet and things like that. So I taught them how to sing God Bless America. And I think at first they were just a little bit surprised, a little bit taken aback that the stranger was up there singing to them and then asking them to join along with him while he sang. But just the same, we got along pretty well. And I felt very good that I could be there again, using my antiquated teaching methods, but at the same time reaching students and hopefully showing them some things that they maybe hadn't learned from other teachers there. I was so surprised, too, as to how much I had aged. When I was there before, I was in my early 40s. I thought that I was an old man, but actually I was a much younger man than I thought. And I found that even though I couldn't walk as well as I could before, and even though I had trouble lifting my suitcase on the train, I learned that it was good to be back. And as I looked around, both in the school where I taught and on the train and the supermarket and places, I learned that I was the oldest person there. You couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm 74. Where I live in North Carolina, there are lots and lots of senior citizens around. But when I was over there, I was the oldest guy around. I looked around, I thought, how can this be? I'm me, but the me I am here is not the same me that I am when I'm back in North Carolina, where there are tens of thousands of retired people just like me. So I had to accommodate myself to that. While I was there, I was riding a train one morning from a city in Austria to Vienna so I could fly back to North Carolina. And I sat across from this beautiful, beautiful young lady. She was about 20 years old, and she came from Croatia. Croatia was a part of Yugoslavia many years ago. And I told her a story she found somewhat hard to believe. I told her that when I went to Croatia for the first time, back in 1992, I think it was, 1992, I took a train from Austria to Zagreb, the capital. And when I got off the train, there was a stern-faced policeman looking at me and said, "Stop, police." So I obeyed his command, and he spoke to me in German, and I understood him to say, "Come with me." I did. And he told me to fork over my passport, which I did. And then he locked me in a room. I didn't know what this was all about. Well, I think what was going on was this was when there was a war going on. You know, Yugoslavia had a very bad civil war during that time, and they thought maybe I was persona non grata, and they were checking to make sure that I wasn't on the blacklist of people who were persona non grata. That's what I think went on. So a half an hour later, the policeman came back, all smiles, gave me my passport, and let me go. This young lady couldn't believe that. She was so surprised to hear that. Well, I said, well, that was your country back when it was having a civil war. You know, Yugoslavia broke up into many pieces. And what often happens in a situation like that is you have warring factions with one another. And here in Croatia, there was a war going on. I could hear the shooting in the background when I was there. And I guess I came at a bad time. But anyway, I'm glad you're here, safe and alive, and I'm glad to be here with you. So we had a very, very enjoyable time. And I had another experience, too, that reminded me a bit of my age. I was in a city in Hungary, going to the city where I used to work as a teacher years ago. And I got to talking to this young man sitting on a bench with me at the railway station. We were both going to the same city. And I told him that I was a little bit troubled by my suitcase, and would he be good enough to help me put my suitcase on the rack up top over the seats, and he was very happy to do so. But it was so good to talk to him. A young man, he was 18. He was on his way to take final examinations so he could go to university this year. One of the big differences between high school in Hungary and high school here in America is that when a young person graduates from high school with a diploma, that's all well and good. But it would be almost like going to law school and graduating from law school and not passing the bar exam. Or like being a doctor, graduating from medical school and not passing the state medical exam to practice medicine. Well, he was on his way to take the examination, part of the examination he had to take. And the examination you take, it's a very stringent examination. It requires months and months of studying. It's a very comprehensive examination. It goes back to like day one of high school, clear through the end of the school year. He was going to take his examination so that he could get the certificate to prove that he was a graduate in good standing. He was going to a university that fall. He was very, very confident he was going to do well. Maybe overly confident. I don't know. He wasn't worried about it. I know when I was in school, I was scared to death to take exams. I still am. When I was in graduate school, I was scared to death. I never was very good at taking exams. And something else too that I was reminded of regarding time. In Europe, they have a wonderful tradition called sister school. Maybe you've heard it before. It's whereby a school in a neighboring country is the sister school of a school in another neighboring country. Well, the sister school in Hungary was a school in Austria. And so from time to time, we would go to Austria, that is we teachers, a few students, administrators, and faculty would go there. And we'd visit with the people there, we'd dance and we'd drink and we'd have a good time. And then the next year, we'd invite them to come over to visit us. And of course, we always had to put on the dog, and outdo the Austrians, let them know that we could do just as good a job, if not better than they could, entertaining us. So it got better every year. Well, this one particular time, I got to know a man who was an English teacher, and his wife was an English teacher in Austria. And the man was a teacher in my sister's school. So we became very good friends over the course of my time there. They'd come and stay with me, and I'd go and stay with them. And then later they had children, and the children would come and visit me. And I remember one time they visited me, and I didn't have enough room for everybody. So mom and dad and the two boys made themselves at home in my bed, and I slept on the living room sofa. But the thing that was so hard to get used to is they divorced. They divorced a few years ago. And going back to see them was strange. I mean, I'm divorced. Who am I to talk about people getting divorced? But it was just so strange seeing them one-on-one. And they were very welcoming to me, very kind, very gracious, and I really enjoyed seeing them. But yet it just felt so strange being with them as separate entities, not as a couple. And their son, one of their sons, had an emotional breakdown over it. He became very, very depressed, and I could see in part why he did. My being there visiting with them was very hard for me, and I could certainly see why it would have been hard for them. But I guess time goes on, and we all adapt to situations as best we can in the midst of our humanness. But I really want to say how much I really enjoyed my time in Hungary when I was a teacher, and how much I enjoyed going back. I also had a time to visit with some former students. We had a little reunion. That was fun to do. And I got to meet them and their children and their spouses, and those who could come. And it was just a wonderful experience of celebrating the present predicated upon the past. The one thing that really struck me too was that maybe was my last trip over there. I rode the train quite a lot when I was over there. Went from place to place, and the trains over there are quite good, as a matter of fact. They run on time, they're clean, they're safe, and much, much safer, I think, than driving a car. So I really had a wonderful time being there. And again, I think one thing that I just didn't quite know or realize was how much older I was. I'm 74 right now. When I was working over there, I was in my early 40s. That's a pretty big stretch of time. But just the same, I'm very thankful that I could go back and celebrate old times with my former students and faculty and staff and colleagues, and just go and have a good time. And just before I leave, I just wanted to mention to you that I had the opportunity to meet with some next door neighbors I'd become very, very fond of. I lived in an apartment in Hungary, and not far away, just next door practically, was a couple I became very, very fond of. And I tried to speak Hungarian as much as I could over there. I don't speak the language, but it's amazing how much of it came back to me while I was there. And when I was sitting in the living room talking to the husband, his wife came in and she looked at me and she said, "Hazi Barat." I said, yeah, Hazi Barat joke. Well, that was a joke we had. I was trying to learn Hungarian and I looked in the dictionary and thought, Hazi Barat, well, Hazi means house and Barat means friend. So house, friend. I thought, my neighbor. When I told them that, they just laughed themselves sick. What Hazi Barat really means, it's kind of a slang for a man who visits a woman when her husband's not around. So they gave me the moniker Hazi Barat. So, I hadn't seen them in 30 years, and Alice walked in and said, "Hazi Barat," Yeah, Hazi Barat. So anyway, it's funny how you can make a mistake with all good intentions. And I remember one time I had him over for an evening, and I served them coffee and cookies, and they wanted to know what do you call this in English? And I said it's a cookie. And when I said cookie, they just exploded with laughter. They just couldn't control themselves. Well, I don't know how to say this, but cookie refers to a certain part of the male anatomy, and I don't want to say any more than that. It's a word that little children, you hear them saying it. It's very common anyway. But so anyway, this couple, they were just two of my dearest, most wonderful friends over there. I love them dearly, almost as if they were members of my family. So anyway, I had a wonderful time going back. I hope to go back again, but I may not be able to. But here I am, North Carolina, where I'll be for a while. So anyway, thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed my story.
We enjoyed all of your stories. They were so wonderful. And you having been an educator and once a teacher, always a teacher,
Sure.
it's nice that you're letting us go with you in your journeys in Europe. That's pretty amazing. I taught for a long time. Several of us have probably been teaching around for a while too, but never over there, not outside of Texas. So I know there's so much you have to offer. Thank you so much. And we loved your music. I was singing along just silently, or everyone
Holding
would
your
have left.
ears.
Yeah, so thank you so much. A few folks have just walked in. We'd like to welcome you to SASA. And Bonnie, I've been wondering, can you take a deep breath? Are you ready to tell?
I guess so.
Yay. Well,
That'll be fun.
Bonnie B, she told for the first time for SASA last month, and we are just so glad that she found us. She is new to San Antonio, and we hope that she'll be sticking around for as long as she can, because we love her stories, and you will too. So how about a big hand for Bonnie B?
Me being late, I just came from work. So, there once was a girl who was afraid of her own shadow. You see, she didn't quite know what it was, and it terrified her. It was so unpredictable. I mean, sometimes it was in front of her, sometimes it was to the side, the back, the other side. Sometimes it was small, she could barely see it, and other times it was huge. But all she knew was it was dark, and it was scary, and she didn't understand it. And so she was afraid. In her fear, she would cry about it sometimes. Like, why is this happening to me? Is it ever gonna end? Why does it make me so afraid? Other times, she would try to deny that this was even happening, or that she was scared, and she would stuff it all down, and she would like be strong and just say like, I'm gonna push through, and this isn't happening, and I'm gonna be okay. And then other times she would just try to like numb out the pain and the fear of the shadow and the not understanding it. And so she would distract herself with different things around her. She would try to stay busy. She would try to do anything to keep her mind off of this thing that was always following. Finally, one day, she was so afraid and she got so fed up that she thought maybe she could outrun it. And she ran and she ran and she ran as fast as she could. And she ran until she was so tired that she just couldn't take another step. And she stopped underneath the tree. And she began to rest. And she noticed that she could no longer see her shadow, but she was underneath the shadow of the tree. And as she looked around, she saw that that squirrel over there also has a shadow, and that bird has a shadow, and wait, that person walking over there also has a shadow. And she started to kind of reconsider what this experience that she had been having was. And she thought to herself, if everyone else has a shadow, then maybe it's actually safe to have a shadow. And maybe I could find security in knowing that I'm not the only one. And with that, she also felt a sense of belonging. And even though the shadow was big and dark and mysterious, and it didn't really have a purpose, she found out that because she could understand that she wasn't the only one, that she had a purpose in showing others.
Bravo. How many of any of you all never had an experience like that? We all have. What great connections, and on so many different levels. Thank you so much. Right now, I'm always looking for a shadow because of the heat. Any kind of shade I can have, I am very appreciative. But the darkness of shadows, what a wonderful thing. Well, we're all here with so much light coming from the stories. We have no shadows going on right now. We have a brilliant star that I would like to invite up here also. Her name is Susan Whipple. And Susan is a pretty amazing storyteller all unto herself. Susan, come on up here. Susan's daughter and her daughter's husband are the ones who actually were the ones who allowed us to be here in Kuentz flooring. And but on top of that, Susan has been telling stories with SASA for quite a few years now and has quite a wonderful repertoire of all genres. So without further ado, we're going to find out exactly what we can listen to. How about a big hand for Susan Whipple?
I'm going to tell a story about a girl too. My story is about a girl who's 4 years old. She was an adorable, cute little thing. She had dimples in her cheeks and in her elbows and in her knees. And she had big brown eyes and light brown hair that her mother fixed in curls that went all the way down to her shoulders. And her parents called those curls boing boing curls because every time she moved, and particularly when she skipped, those curls would bounce around. Her name was Alice, but they called her Allie. Now, since Allie was not yet in kindergarten, she played a lot by herself. She had toys, she looked at books, she had tea parties with her dolls, but sometimes she would play with the other neighborhood children and all the mothers would sit around drinking coffee and watching over them. And sometimes she would even walk with her mother a few blocks to where her mother bought all her food. One late afternoon, Allie and her mother walked to the fish market to buy some fresh fish for supper. saying fresh fish is not always easy. And then they got there and Allie was really happy. She'd been there before and she loved this place. It was a huge, huge store. And it had counters on both sides from front to back where everybody prepared the fish. But in the middle, the flooring was wood and it had sawdust on it. But the main thing was it had some little ponds. They were maybe 4 feet square and just high enough so that if Allie could stand on her tippy toes, she could see inside. There were live fish swimming in them, and different fish, different kinds of fish in each one. And they were all over the middle of the store. She loved it. Well, she was doing that while her mother was waiting her turn. And finally, her mother was asked what she wanted, and she pointed to a fish and she said, "I wanted that one." And the man took his long-handled net and he walked over there and he aimed for it and he put the net down in and scooped up the fish and he got it out of the water. And as he did, the fish jumped out of the net. It just scurried out of the net and it was like a flying fish. It just flew and landed on the floor. Well, everybody in the store moved to the sides, the customers, the workers. They just gave everybody a lot of room. And that fish went from one place to the other. It used its tail to project itself. It used its body. And the man was following after with his net. He would just try to get it wherever it landed. But wherever he landed the net, the fish had already gone somewhere else. And this went on for the longest time. And finally, the fish grew tired. And the man was able to catch him. So he went to prepare the fish for Allie's mother. And they waited around until everything was taken care of, and then they left. And Allie and her mother walked home hand in hand. Allie didn't say much. She just was okay. She just walked home. And when she got home, she went into her room to play, and Mother went in to start preparing supper. Well, her mother began to have some second thoughts about her daughter's behavior. And she thought, you know, this was quite an event. I wonder what was she thinking in her head? And she'd go into Allie's room or just look at her from the doorway to see if she was okay. And she was fine. So after the first couple of times, she stopped doing that. Pretty soon it was time for Allie's supper. She always ate early because Daddy worked late. And Allie needed a regular bedtime. So she had her supper and her bath, and she was in her pajamas. And she was allowed to stay up till Daddy came, but just barely. And she was sitting at she had a little child's table with a little child's chair, and she was leafing through her books until she heard his key in the door. And she put the book down and she ran out of her room over to the door, and she caught him just as he went in, and she grabbed him around his knees before he could even pick her up and give her a hug. And she looked up at him, hanging onto his knees, and she said, "Daddy, Daddy, guess what? Mommy bought a woggly fish."
Thank you so much, Susan. It's amazing. All right, our next teller, she's pretty amazing too. She actually co-founded San Antonio Storytellers Association. And we're so excited that she did, because if it wasn't for her, I'm not sure where all of our stories would be heard. And she's done so much else, including going all the way up to the national level and making sure that storytelling is so very, very important. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Mary Grace Ketner. And while she's coming up here, I want you to come on up here. While she's coming up here, I want you all to know that about 5 or 6 of us of the San Antonio Storytellers have been involved with the San Antonio Public Library. And they wanted adult storytelling. And they wanted us to give a little bit of tips and advice about storytelling. So that's going on right now through July. So just go to our SASA website or our SASA Facebook page, and you can see the schedule and come visit us. It's all free. And you guys can learn even more if you'd like. Just spread the word. Without further ado, Mary Grace.
I want to share with you a story that I actually have have told at the libraries lately, and one reason I chose it is that I sort of had it in my back pocket because you never know if you have a 1 hour program, sometimes the stories get a little longer or a little shorter, and so you have to have some kind of expandable story, and this is one of those. But one of the things that and I told the shortest version of it every time, but one of the things that I didn't get to do was to tell the story of the story. You see, this story I learned from Fran Stallings, who is sometimes up there on the screen with us.
Yes.
And she learned it over red beans and rice from Elizabeth Ellis. And Elizabeth Ellis heard it from Sue Hinkle, who's a storyteller who lives in St. Louis. And Sue says she learned it from her father-in-law. So, and then there's another guy who says he heard this story, was told in a Hopalong Cassidy's movie of the 20s, and with the story he won the yarn spinning contest. So maybe I should tell it for the Liars contest.
Yes.
Way back about 100 years ago, there was a drought in the brush country, South Texas. And there was a rancher there who had quite a fine herd under normal circumstances, but during this several years drought, his cattle had declined a little bit. And one day he called his foreman to him. He said, "Joe, I want you to take these cattle up to Kansas City, take the boys, and sell them for whatever you can get for them, these skinny little cows, and let the boys go and come on back. I'll be glad to see you." And so Joe gathered up the guys. He sorted out the cattle and left some to be a seed herd, the best ones. And then he and the guys herded them up to Dodge City. Did I say Kansas City? Oh, well. Herded them up to Dodge City. And that was a trip, of course, of many weeks. And then he sold them, and that took about a week just to get all the negotiations and the paperwork done. But he was kind of glad to have a week's stay in a hotel and sleep in a real bed. And every night there was a card game going on downstairs, so he had plenty of entertainment as well. Well, when all was said and done, he went back home, and he gave the rancher back the money that he had made, and he said, "But now I'd like to excuse myself. I need to go into town. I have a little business to take care of." Well, he went straight to the saloon, and he called on Miss Sandy, and he said to her, I know last night the boys were here. They just kind of tore up the place, and I'd like to give you this $100 bill. I won it in a card game in Dodge City, and I'd like for you to have it just to make some of the repairs that I'm sure were necessary. And Miss Sandy said, "Oh, you didn't have to do that, but I do appreciate it." And as soon as he left, she went across the street to the grocer. And she held out that $100 bill. She said, "I really appreciate your carrying me all these months, and I'd like to pay on my bill, and I'll get the rest to you as soon as I can." Well, the grocer had been carrying just about everybody in town, but he was glad to get a little payment. And soon after she left, he went down the street to the undertaker. He said, "I really appreciate the way you handled my wife's funeral last month. I might not have been able to do anything at all for her, and yet you did everything you could. You did it beautifully, and you never even bugged me about paying you for it. But I'd like to give you $100 right now." Well, the undertaker was very glad to receive that, and as soon as the grocer left, he went across the street to the livery stable. You see, they'd been feeding his fine black horses that he used on his hearse all along, and he hadn't been able to pay him. So he took that $100 bill over there and he gave it to the liveryman. And what do you think? You probably figured this story out. The liveryman took it out to the farmer who had been providing him feed on credit. He thanked him very much. And when he left, the farmer took the $100 bill over to the rancher because you see, he hadn't paid his rent in several months. Well, that night it was just Joe and the rancher and the cook at supper time. And the rancher said to Joe, I wanna, you've just been so good to me, and I do wanna give you a little bonus for what all you've done. And he gave Joe that $100 bill. He said, but I gotta ask you a favor tonight. It's supposed to be a lightning storm and we gotta take good care of that seed herd. I wonder if you could go out to the prairie and sit with them while they're there and keep them still and steady. And Joe said, sure, I'll be glad to do that. Well, he went out to where the herd was. He built himself a little fire, made himself a pot of coffee, and then he took that $100 bill out of his pocket. He held it up to the light of the evening sun, and then he took it and he touched the edge of it to the flames. And when it caught fire, he held it up for a while and he watched as it burned down, down, until it got to the tips of his fingers, and he dropped it and watched it finish burning off down in the ashes. Because you see, he figured that $100 bill had done just about all the good it could do. He recognized it as counterfeit the minute he won it in that game in Dodge City.
I bet you didn't see that coming. Actually, I saw the $100 bill burning. Did y'all see that burning? I'm going, that's not the way a story ought to end. But that was brilliant. Thank you so much, Mary Grace. I'm going to keep on going because we're going to try to fit in 2 more tellers. And one of our next teller is actually our co-host, one of our co-hosts, and that would be John Hale. And I'm going to kind of take his place while he comes up here and presents his story. So let's give John a big hand.
So last month, I talked about my dad wanting to be a Boy Scout, but there were no adult leaders. So today, it's the second part. As an adult, he was Scout leader all his life. And he had 7 boys, which made it easy to be a Scout leader. And then he passed it on to me. I was a Boy Scout, and I have a young son, and now I'm the Boy Scout leader, with several other adults in the community. One of the things we do as adult leaders is help our young men and now young women to be able to learn to be strong leaders, to be prepared, and to follow the Scout motto and the Scout law. So these young men, and in this case it was just the young men, were getting ready for a big trip in the summer. And they were really excited because they were going to be out for a whole week, and it was going to be hiking from one point of the canyon in southern Utah all the way to the other end. And I'm not even talking about the Grand Canyon. This was a narrow little fat man's misery, they called it. But hiking and camping out along the way. It was going to be a lot of fun. But to prepare for that, what they did is every month they'd have an overnight camp out. And the Scouts learned how to prepare and how to go and hike all day and have their food, everything they needed in their backpacks and in there with their gear. So when they got together on Wednesday night and they were getting ready for that Scout trip that was coming up to Friday, and the adults said, all right, go in there and have a meeting and figure this out. Well, the leader now was a new Scout leader at 17. The other boy had just graduated the program and he went off to college. So now it was him. And he just looked at the boys and he kind of just put his hands up in the air and he said, you know what? we know what we're doing. We've done the same thing every month. Just do what we always do. And everybody fine with that? Yep. Okay, good, good. So everybody be here at 5 o'clock. No, wait. Be here at 4 o'clock. All right, everybody be here at 4 o'clock. And the adult leader came back and he said, are you guys all ready? Do you got all the gear you need? Do you guys have all the camping equipment? Do you have the food, entertainment all planned out? And he said, yeah, we got it. It's good. It's good. We're going to do it just like last time. And the adult leader kind of said, all right. And so they quickly went over and played basketball, because when they weren't doing scouting and opening up their scout book and working on all those kind of achievements, they'd run over and play basketball for the rest of the night. And that's all they really wanted. They didn't want to sit there and make all kinds of paperwork and try and figure it all out. So Friday came. The adult leaders were there with their truck and the van. And that was all. The boys weren't there. And then about 5:15, the boys started rolling in. And the adult leaders looking at their watch. And they're like, oh, I think he said 5 o'clock. No, he said 5:30. Oh. But they quickly went to the scout hut. They grabbed all the gear, sleeping bags, tents, tent poles, all that stuff, and just started throwing it in the back of that pickup truck. And then they grabbed the big gear box that had all the pots and the pans and all the dry food, all that kind of stuff, and put that in the back of the truck. And they were like, okay, we got our camping gear, we need our Frisbees and a football. Okay, now we're set. Got their food, their gear, and their entertainment. And they headed out. It was going to be like a 4-hour drive to the mountains. Since they're leaving a little bit late, like 6 o'clock, they're going to get there. It was going to be dark. While they're driving there, most of the young men, they fell asleep. So when they got there, it was late, but they started packing up. There was no moon out, so they had little flashlights kind of scrambling around, trying to figure out how to put up their tents. And then they realized, we forgot some tent poles, and we didn't have enough sleeping bags for everybody. And now some of the guys are gonna have to bunch up in the same tent because we didn't bring enough tents for everybody to have their own tent. This is when you can start to see this idea of do it like we did last time. It's falling apart. They went to bed tired and just kind of frustrated that they didn't have the right kind of sleeping equipment. But they woke up early in the morning, because when you're camping late in the spring, the sun seems to come up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And these boys have never seen 5 o'clock in the morning or the sunrise, but today was the day. They had the campfire going, and they got the coals just right. And when the adults got up about half an hour, they were impressed. Wow, look at these boys are already making breakfast. They went to the gear box, and they opened up, and they started getting the pots and the pans out, and they had powdered eggs. Well, all right, powdered eggs. So they made their powdered eggs, and they had their Tang. Okay, Tang orange juice is okay, made their Tang orange juice. And they had the pancake mix, and putting that all together. One boy was working on scrambled eggs, and he had that pot going on down there. Another one, he said, I'm going to use the biggest pan to make the pancakes. So he got that big griddle, the big iron skill. What's that? Cast iron, that's what I'm trying to say. And so to make the perfect pancakes. And he wanted a big one. It was like bigger than your head. And he had it going, and it was looking beautiful. And he turns to his buddy and said, hey, can you give me the spatula out of the gearbox? Went over to the box, and he's looking around everywhere. Well, he handed him a spoon. I can't find the spatula, to flip over the pancakes. And so the guy starts using a spoon and trying to get the edges all up just right. And it kind of, sort of was working, but not really. And then when he got it under there to flip it over, it all broke up. But he noticed something. The way it broke up, kind of looked like a scrambled egg. So what he did was every 20 seconds, he'd stir it a little bit. And he'd stir it a little bit. And he realized, wow, look at us scouts. We just invented something. And so he's all excited. And he's telling everybody, hey, it's all right that we didn't have the spatula because we created something wonderful. I can call it a new what should we call this new tree? So all the boys got up there with their plates and everything, and he got the spoon, put it on there, and he looked at it, and they said, you know what? I have a name for it. And let me tell you, you do not ever want to experience scrambled pancakes because they are half cooked on one side, hard on the other, and no good.
I was getting pretty hungry there. I think I'll try it no matter what. Really quick, we're gonna get one more teller up here. He came up with the story while we're here, so we're so excited. This is a tale that you've told a while ago, and we would love for Jeff Blake to share it with all of us. How about a big hand for Jeff?
Thanks much. Watch the spot. Okay, so the story I'm about to tell you is a story that kind of takes place at a time. Well, it could actually be now. So when you're driving along, say, a long highway, like say when you're going east of San Antonio, seems to be, a lot of small towns, but everything's pretty prosperous and whatnot. You're going to run into towns, Columbus, Schulenburg, and it goes on, eventually Houston and up. You go west, eventually you're going to hit some pretty big cities, but there is a whole lot of nothing if you're like trying to get to, like, say, Los Angeles. It is a long drive. Well, imagine taking a drive like that. There was a lawyer, young man, and he was kind of trying to get an early start. He had a appointment at the courthouse the following day, and he took a wrong turn. So he figured, okay, let me go ahead and take an exit here, and I'll get right back on the highway. That was his plan. And as he followed that road on down, he couldn't find his way back onto the highway. And he figured, well, it's got to eventually curve back around. Well, it really didn't. He just kept on driving for mile after mile after mile after mile. Eventually, he came up along a lone house, like an old kind of a ramshackle type of almost like a cabin, but just barely holding together, kind of rickety. And as he's going there, he sees that there is an old man sitting there right there on the porch, just rocking, and got a little bit of a shadow or whatever cast him. The sun's pretty high up, and he goes to the man because also his GPS on his vehicle is completely dead. He doesn't know where he is. His GPS is going. So he walks up to the man and he says, "Pardon me, sir. Do you think you might be able to direct me back onto the road?" And the old man, who's just rocking back and forth, he says, "A little closer there, sonny." He's just rocking back and forth. And he stops. And the man does come a little bit closer. "I can't hear too good. Say that again. Could you maybe give me directions to get back onto the road? I've got an appointment at the courthouse next morning." He's like, "Okay, well, to get back on the highway, you just take this left, follow this road down here. Just follow it for a piece, and then you're going to take this road over here. You're going to take a left here at County 232 County Road, and you're going to keep on taking that. And you'll take a left, then you'll take a right at the next turn, and then take two lefts there, and that should get you back on the highway." And he's like, "Thank you, sir, much obliged." And he gets back into his souped up vehicle and whatnot, and is about to start off, and then he pulls back up to the man. And he says, "Pardon me, sir. It's been quite a while, and this sun has been on my car, and I don't have anything more to drink. You wouldn't happen to have any water, would you?" Well, that's no problem. Why don't you just go right on back? I got a well out back for you. Go ahead and drink to your heart's content. So he starts to head up, but one thing he notices that he didn't notice before is that that old man got a whole lot of gristle. He got a beard, and there's a whole lot of chewing tobacco spit coming on down. Pretty darn gruesome. Just go on back there. The well's right back there. So he starts going back through the house, goes to the back to the well. And as he's going, he finds that there it is out there all by its lonesome, looks dusty as the old man up front. And he starts rolling up the bucket. And inside, when he finally rolls the bucket, it's cricket. And it gets up and it comes up. And right in there in that bucket, there is a ladle. And there seems to be, the water seems clear enough. And as he's bringing that ladle up, he brings it up to his mouth and he stops for just a second. Who else will be drinking from this ladle? Let that man with all of that gristle and everything come down. He's like, he's so thirsty. He's thinking, how is he gonna get that water out of there? So he looks at the ladle, and the ladle has, oddly enough, it has a little bit of a crevice going right down the center. You can imagine. So like a little, like a little channel is built in there, and he's thinking, well, I have to kind of be artsy about it, but I think I could get the water up through. So he lifted it in there, pours the water, and he's able to drink it on down, just get a little bit. He does it again, until he gets the water to his heart's content, at least enough to get it by. And so he starts heading back out front. He kind of tips his hat and says, "Thank you very much. I'll be off now." And then little did he know, apparently, that that old man, he knew something. He had seen it. He had been watching how he was going to get at that. And he got up out of his seat and said, "Son, I just want to let you know, I'm mighty impressed at your ingenuity. I have had quite a few people come and go over the years. But do you know you are the very first to drink water out of a ladle the same way that I do?"
Great story. And what better story to leave you with as I go home and wash all my dishes. I'd like to thank each and every one of you who are here live. It was wonderful to fit everybody in. I hope we were able to. And those of you who have a story and we just didn't know about it, next time. We meet the very first Wednesday of every month. We're live, but we're also on Zoom. And so thank you, all of you who are out there. We can't have you without being a teller or being a wonderful listener. So thank you all. And without further ado, I just want to remind you that we are on Facebook and we do have our website, San Antonio Storytellers. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in